Hello, I'm Terry McDonnell. I used to be in the Air Force for quite a few years and long since retired from the Air Force. I'm now 90 years old and running out of time, so I better talk quickly.
So, Terry, do you remember your rank?
I had a range of ranks. From first joining the Air Force, I was an aircraftman recruit minor. Then I got to be a sergeant, then a flight sergeant, then a warrant officer, then a flying officer, then a flight lieutenant, a squadron leader, wing commander and group captain before I retired.
And did you have the same number through all those things?
Similar. As an airman, non-commissioned, I was A38531. When I got commissioned, it became O38531. Otherwise, yes, I remember that.
And how old were you when you joined the Defence Forces?
When I was 18, the 1951 National Service Scheme was in practice, where all 18-year-old males had to register for Defence Force service, 5 years on the reserve, which included 176 days, I think it was, of actual training, and the rest just being there. That was different to the scheme that came in later on for the Vietnam War, which applied only to people being in the Army for 2 years active service. But I joined the RAAF, the Nasho scheme, and when I was at Laverton, I found the opportunity to get some flying training, which they were offering to some of the trainees. So I got a few hours on the Tiger Moth. I qualified for a private pilot licence. Around about then I thought, this is not a bad sort of a game. Doing something I like and getting well paid for it. So I went back to my job in McDonnell and after a few months applied to join the Permanent Air Force, and I joined in 1953 and went on until 1985.
Wow. And in between those years, you served overseas during wars as a pilot?
Yes, I served in the Korean War, I served in the Vietnam War, I served in Indonesian confrontation. Apart from that, spent time in New Guinea and travelled also over to the USA on duty.
That was a lot of postings.
Indeed. It was a bit hard to keep track of things at times, and it was particularly hard for my wife and then for the kids when they started going to school. They were forever changing schools and losing out on continuity. In some respects they gained from the experience of moving around. In other respects, no, it was hard for them to have to readjust every year or two and find a new bunch of people to work with. We had a home in East Bentley, and I got back there as often as I could manage, so the kids knew that as home base, even though we weren't always there. But it was an interesting life. The challenge was there for my wife to look after kids while I was away somewhere.
So can you please now share a little bit about your family life? Now, when you got married and your wife's name, and just a little bit about Terry McDonnell, the family man, please.
Okay, we got married on the 23rd of July 1955 when I was in transit to be posted to Japan. We had decided that we would like to spend more time together. There was no official arrangement for family going to Japan, but we decided to pay for Judy's trip on a boat to get up there and hope we could find somewhere to live. Well, as it turned out, when I got up there, I found there was another guy who had his wife there. She was just about to go home, so I was able to get onto the accommodation that he'd been hiring and had that there as a place to live when Judy came up. I met her in Yokkaichi and took her back by train to Iwakuni, and so we spent married life there while I was dashing off most mornings to fly to Korea, and then we'd have time together afterwards. After a few months, she was told by an American doctor that she was pregnant, which surprised us, and so we arranged to get her home. The Royal New Zealand Air Force was running a regular courier service from Manuapai up to Iwakuni, doing about once a month. So I wrote to the CEO of that squadron and asked if we could catch a ride back. And they said, yes, can do. All you got to do is pay £5 for your rations on the way. And they brought it back as far as Amberley Air Force Base near Brisbane. And then a friend of mine there managed to get her on another aircraft down to Laverton, where she rang her dad, and then she was home. She was 21.
Uh-huh. And she had her first child at home with her parents?
Oh no, that turned out to be a mistake, that pregnancy.
Okay.
She didn't get pregnant until after I came home.
Oh, there you go.
So, first child born in 1957, just after we'd bought a house in East Pentley, which I didn't know anything about the defence. I've forgotten the name of it now, but the Defence Force
Funds?
loan. Until she said, I've heard about this, find out about it. So I did. It turned out I was able to get a loan for housing. We bought the house in East Pentley. We'd been there a week when daughter turned up. And that was our home base for the next 20 years at least. Not all was living there because I'd be sent away and the family would come with me sometimes, or other times stay home while I was away. But we had 3 more daughters there, and they all got married at various times, some more than once, and have produced 8 grandchildren, and now I've got 4 great-grandchildren. My wife died in 1991.
Tell me a bit about your Korean War service, please.
Well, I'd recently qualified as a pilot in 1954, and I was then flying Dakota aircraft, the transport aircraft, out of number 86 wing in Canberra, and to my surprise I got posted to RAAF Transport Flight Japan, based at Iwakuni, Japan, for service to Korea. Now, the Korean War had come to an armistice in, I think it was July 1953, and major forces were withdrawn, but there were still some forces there. Nobody trusted anybody, so the army had at least a battalion there and other troops. The Air Force had reduced its commitment to less than a full squadron, but what they called a flight, a subset of a squadron, with 3 Dakota aircraft to provide transport support to BritCom, which was British Forces Korea, or British Command Korea. We were notionally under the control of the Brits still, but they'd pretty well disappeared, so we were to a degree independent then, working with the Americans, of course, who were in charge of the whole business. And our job was to do daily courier runs from Iwakuni to Kimpo, K14, in the northern part of South Korea. It was very close to the demilitarised zone on the 38th parallel, and flying there in bad weather, flying on instruments, could get perilously close to the DMZ at times, where if you got that close you could get artillery or anti-aircraft artillery shots. A couple of American aircraft were shot down in my time there. We didn't get any hits, but we were always very wary about that.
Wow.
Well, flying in the Vietnam War was probably the most challenging thing. That was a demanding situation, in that I was the flight commander, so-called. It means the senior pilot in the squadron, so I was responsible for the training and categorisation of all the other pilots, as well as doing the operational flying myself. Challenging, but satisfying.
Told that you were twice bombed by B-52s.
Oh, yes. Yes, flying in Vietnam, the normal arrangement was that as you're transiting from one region to another, you made radio contact, told them who you were, got the okay to move in there, that it was safe to do so, they weren't going to try and shoot you down. And on a particular day I'd I'd taken a load of supplies into a US Special Forces base deep in the hills. The way the radio was in those days, we were out of contact while we were deep in that area, and as we were leaving, flying out, I was trying to make radio contact, and before I could get in contact, I saw the terrain around me having little puffs of smoke coming up everywhere, and I thought that's unusual, and finally got radio contact, told them where I was, and they said, get out, there's B-52s then. I said, I bloody well know, but which way do I go? Didn't get hit. Went back and worked through the system with the Yanks saying, why couldn't I be told that was going to happen? I said, oh, we can't announce over the radio there's B-52 strike coming on because the Viet Cong are listening in, but what we will say is, oh, there's artillery in the area. The Viet Cong wouldn't be smart enough to interpret that. So I passed the word through the rest of the squadron. You always get clearance from artillery, and about 3 months later, having got clearance into an area, flying along, I suddenly saw the same puffs of smoke, which I recognised as B-52 bombs. Got back on radio and I said, there's a B-52 strike going on. They said, no, there's not. I said, there bloody well is. And then they checked and said, oh, yeah, there's a B-52 strike, get out of there. Well, you can't do much about it. Okay, I've got a total of 5,300 flying hours. Of those, 740 were accumulated in the Korean flying, and 1,263 in a year in Vietnam. The others were spread over the years, of course. That's the total.
And lots of different types of aircraft. Do you have a favourite?
I think the Dakota was probably my favourite, well, two favourites. It's a bit like having 4 kids, you can't have them all as favourites.
Oh, yes.
The Dakota was a lovely aeroplane to fly. I thought it was a bit like a nice old lady. Whereas the Caribou was an enthusiastic youth, I suppose. You could do more with it, and it was much more dramatic and much more challenging to fly. But they each had their virtues.
You were a Vietnamese linguist, intelligence analyst.
Oh, yeah. I'd had a medical problem in 1960 that took me off flying for a while, and I was working in administration and started to wonder, what will I do if I can't get back into flying? And thought a further string to my bow was to do a language course which the Defence Forces were offering to people. So I applied for a course and got selected to do Vietnamese. I knew roughly where Vietnam was, but no further detail. Did the 12 months course, qualified as a linguist to do interpretations, translations. You're supposed to be able to read newspapers and do all sorts of things like that. And then I went and worked in, I forget the name of the organisation now, we're based in Albert Park Barracks that no longer exists, where we were getting intercepted communications from both north and south, and they were coded in a system something like that wartime World War II Enigma code. We had people working on computers that were able to break through that, get down to the next layer, where it became a matter of understanding the language and being able to work back through that. So my predecessors had developed, I suppose, vocabulary more or less of these things, so they were able to work through and analyse and say, right, there's a squadron or a battalion of Viet Cong moving from here to there, pass that word through the system. That lasted for a year or so, then I got posted off to go back to flying. That was satisfying, but flying was better.